No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Carl Jung wrote that nearly a century ago, and yet every single day, millions of people wake up and make the same catastrophic mistake. They expect the people in their lives to be good. Picture this. You're lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying a conversation in your head for the 20th time. Someone you trusted, perhaps deeply, has disappointed you. Maybe they lied. Maybe they chose themselves over you when you needed them most. Maybe they simply revealed a side of themselves you never knew existed. And now you're asking yourself the question that has haunted human beings since the dawn of consciousness. How could they? How could they be so selfish? How could they be so cruel? How could they look you in the eyes and still do what they did? You feel betrayed. You feel foolish. You feel like the ground beneath your feet has cracked open, revealing something dark and writhing underneath. But here is what Carl Jung, the grandfather of the unconscious mind, would tell you if he could speak to you right now. In this moment of despair, the problem isn't them. The problem is your expectation. The problem is that you looked at another human being and expected to see an angel, when what you were actually looking at was what Jung called a creature of light and shadow, half sinner, half human, half ghost. And the most disturbing part, so are you, so am I, so is everyone you have ever loved, everyone you have ever hated, and everyone you will ever meet. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you will stop being devastated by human nature, and the sooner you will finally understand it. Carl Gustav Jung. The name alone carries weight. He was Freud's crown prince before their legendary falling out. He was the man who gave us the concepts of introversion and extroversion, the collective unconscious, and perhaps most importantly, the shadow, that part of ourselves we hide from the world, and often from ourselves. Jung spent over 6 decades exploring the darkest corridors of the human psyche. He treated schizophrenics when others had given up on them. He studied ancient alchemy, Eastern philosophy, and world mythology, searching for universal patterns in the human soul. And what he found, again and again, was this: we are not who we think we are. We are much more complex, much more contradictory, and much more capable of both tremendous good and tremendous evil than our conscious minds want to admit. Today, we live in an age of moral performance. Social media has turned ethics into a spectator sport. We watch people get cancelled for sins both large and small. We curate our online personas to appear kinder, more virtuous, more enlightened than we actually are. And in doing so, we have collectively forgotten one of the most fundamental truths about being human. Perfection is not just unattainable, it is unnatural. Jung would look at our world today and shake his head. Not because we're worse than previous generations, but because we're more deluded. We've built technologies that allow us to project idealized versions of ourselves, while simultaneously judging others for failing to live up to ideals that no one, not a single person in human history, has ever actually achieved. This video is an invitation to drop the pretense, to look at the people in your life, and the person in your mirror with clearer, wiser, more compassionate eyes. Let's start with a scenario you probably know all too well. You meet someone, they seem wonderful, charming, thoughtful. They say all the right things. They make you feel seen, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers, finally, a good one. Weeks pass, months, maybe years, and then, slowly or suddenly, the cracks appear. They snap at you over something trivial. They make a choice that seems inexplicably selfish. They reveal a prejudice, a pettiness, a darkness that you never saw coming, and you think, I didn't know them at all. But here is what Jung would tell you. You did know them. You just refused to see the whole picture. What you encountered was their shadow. The shadow in Jungian psychology is not a metaphor. It is a psychological structure, a real, functional part of the psyche that contains everything we have rejected about ourselves. Every cruel thought we've suppressed, every selfish impulse we've denied, every part of ourselves that doesn't fit the image we want to project to the world. And here is where evolutionary psychology adds a crucial layer. Why do we have a shadow in the first place? In the tribal environments where human psychology was forged, survival depended on being accepted by the group. If you showed your full self, your aggression, your lust, your envy, your fear, you risked being cast out, and being cast out meant death. So we learned to hide. We learned to perform. We developed an elaborate mask that Jung called the persona, the face we show the world, and we shoved everything that didn't fit that mask into a dark basement of the psyche. But here is the catch. What we suppress doesn't disappear. It festers, it grows, and eventually it leaks out. In our dreams, in our slip-ups, in those moments when we do or say something and think, where did that come from? The shadow is not a character flaw. It is not a sign that someone is bad. It is a feature of being human. Every single person you meet is walking around with a psychological basement full of rejected material. The only question is whether they know it is there. So the next time someone disappoints you, before you label them a hypocrite or a fraud, ask yourself, did they reveal their shadow, or did you simply refuse to believe they had one? There is an old saying that goes, no man is a hero to his valet. It means that the people who see us up close, who witness our morning breath, our irritable moods, our petty moments, can never worship us the way a distant admirer might. Jung took this further. He argued that intimacy itself is a form of disillusionment, not because love is a lie, but because closeness destroys the illusions that distance maintains. Think about your closest relationships, your parents, your partner, your oldest friend. These are the people who have seen you at your worst. They've seen you lie, lose your temper, act out of fear or ego, and you've seen the same in them. This is why long-term relationships are so difficult. It is not just that the honeymoon phase ends. It is that the longer you know someone, the more of their shadow you encounter. You start to see the parts they've hidden, not just from you, but from themselves. Consider the story of a patient Jung described in his writings. A man who had idealized his father throughout his childhood. In the boy's eyes, his father was a paragon of virtue, wise, fair, morally impeccable. But as the boy grew into a man and began to see his father as an equal rather than a god, he started noticing things, small cruelties, hypocrisies, moments of weakness that had been invisible to his child's eyes. The man came to Jung in crisis, not because his father had done anything dramatic, but because the slow accumulation of small revelations had shattered his worldview. "I don't know who he is anymore," the man said. Jung's response was characteristically blunt. You never knew who he was. You knew who you needed him to be. This is the curse of intimacy. The people we love are not statues. They are not fixed images. They are living, breathing contradictions. And the closer we get, the more those contradictions reveal themselves. The question is not whether the people in your life will disappoint you. They will. The question is whether you can love them anyway, not in spite of their darkness, but with full knowledge of it. Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." He wasn't being dramatic. He was describing a psychological truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. When we hold others to impossible moral standards, we are not being righteous. We are being violent. We are saying, "I refuse to see you as you actually are. I will only accept the version of you that fits my fantasy." This is what Jung called moral perfectionism, and he considered it one of the most dangerous psychological tendencies. Not because morality is bad. Jung was deeply concerned with ethics, but because perfectionism is a weapon disguised as virtue. Look at cancel culture. Look at the way we destroy people for a single mistake, a single bad take, a single moment of weakness. We have created a world where no one is allowed to have a shadow, and yet everyone does. The cruelty of moral perfectionism is that it is usually wielded by people who have not examined their own darkness. It is always easier to point at someone else's sins than to sit with your own. Evolutionarily, this makes sense. Condemning others raises our status in the tribe. It says, "I am not like them. I am safe. I am good." But this strategy only works if we never look too closely at ourselves. And here is the Jungian twist. The traits we condemn most violently in others are often the traits we are most afraid of finding in ourselves. The person who rages against dishonesty may be hiding their own lies. The person who cannot forgive betrayal may be terrified of their own capacity for it. This is why Jung urged radical self-honesty before moral judgment. Before you crucify someone else for their shadow, he would say, you had better be absolutely certain you have confronted your own. And if you have, you'll probably be a lot less eager to throw stones. The next time you feel righteous anger rising in your chest, pause, Ask yourself, what part of me is this really about? Picture a love that doesn't demand perfection, a friendship that doesn't require performance, a family bond that survives revelation after revelation. This is what Jung called individuation in relationship, the process of becoming whole together, not by hiding our broken pieces, but by showing them to each other and saying, "This is me, all of me." Jung told the story of a married couple who came to him on the verge of divorce. The wife had discovered that her husband had been having an affair, not a current one, but one from years earlier that he had buried and never confessed. She was devastated, not by the affair itself, but by the lie. "I thought I knew him," she said. But as Jung worked with them, something unexpected happened. The husband, in his shame and guilt, began to reveal other hidden parts of himself. Fears, insecurities, childhood wounds he had never shared, and the wife, in her pain, began to do the same. The affair had cracked open a door that had been locked for years. 6 months later, they told Jung their marriage was stronger than it had ever been. Not because the affair was forgiven and forgotten, but because it had forced them to see each other fully for the first time. Jung called this process the union of opposites, the alchemical transformation that happens when we stop demanding that others, and ourselves, be only light. When we can hold both the light and the dark, we become whole, and only whole people can truly love. But let's be realistic, this is not easy. It requires looking at things we don't want to see. It requires mourning the idealized version of someone and accepting the real one. It requires saying, "I see your darkness, and I choose to stay." This is the only love that lasts. Everything else is just a beautiful illusion waiting to shatter. There is a phrase that sounds pessimistic, but is actually liberating. Expect nothing and you'll never be disappointed. Jung would have amended this slightly. Expect everything, the good and the bad, and you'll never be shocked. This is not cynicism, this is realism, and there is a profound difference. The cynic believes people are fundamentally bad and withdraws from connection. The Jungian realist believes people are fundamentally complex and remains engaged, but without naivete too. When you stop expecting moral purity from others, something strange happens. You become kinder. You become more patient. You stop being blindsided by betrayal, because you never believed betrayal was impossible in the first place. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse. It doesn't mean you have no standards. It means you hold people accountable, while also holding space for their humanity. It means you can say, "That was wrong, and I understand why you did it." Remember, every person you meet is fighting a war you know nothing about. They are carrying wounds from childhood, from past relationships, from failures they've never processed. They are often not acting from malice, they are acting from pain. Of course, understanding is not the same as excusing. You can understand why someone hurt you and still choose to walk away. But understanding changes the quality of that walking away. It transforms bitterness into something closer to peace. The goal is not to become a doormat, and therefore never destroyed by it. Let's end where all of Jung's work ultimately leads. Back to you. You have a shadow. Right now, as you listen to these words, there are parts of you that you have hidden from the world. Parts you might not even be able to name. Impulses you've never acted on. Thoughts you've never spoken aloud. A version of yourself that would horrify the person you pretend to be. Jung's entire therapeutic project was about helping people meet their shadow, not to destroy it, not to indulge it, but to integrate it. To become whole by accepting all the parts of oneself, even the ugly ones. This is uncomfortable work. It requires sitting with shame, with guilt, with the knowledge that you are not as good as you would like to be. But it is also the only path to real psychological health. Jung himself underwent this process during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. A period of several years in which he deliberately explored his own darkest depths. He recorded his experiences in the Red Book, a work so personal and disturbing that it wasn't published until 50 years after his death. In those pages, Jung dialogued with figures from his unconscious, dark figures, frightening figures, parts of himself he had never acknowledged. He emerged from that period, not as a saint, but as a whole man, a man who knew what he was capable of, both good and evil, and who chose his actions with open eyes. You don't need to write a red book, but you do need to ask yourself, what have I hidden? What parts of me am I afraid to see? And what would it mean to finally bring them into the light? Carl Jung spent his life studying what he called the night side of life, the dreams, the myths, the unconscious forces that shape us in ways we barely understand. And the conclusion he reached, after decades of this work, was paradoxically simple. We are not broken. We are not fallen. We are simply complete, in ways we have been taught to deny. Every soul is half human, half ghost. Every heart contains both a chapel and a crypt. And the people who understand this, who can look at another human being and see the full spectrum of what they are, these are the people who move through life without constant disappointment. Not because they expect less from others, but because they expect all of them. The world will try to convince you that good people exist, that if you just find the right partner, the right friend, the right leader, you will finally be safe from the darkness of human nature. This is a beautiful dream, and it is a lie. There are no purely good people. There are only people who have made peace with their shadows, and people who haven't. So here is your choice. You can keep searching for angels and keep being devastated when you find humans instead. Or you can join the few who have learned to love the ghosts in others and in themselves. The mystics called this compassion. Jung called it individuation. I simply call it growing up. The people in your life are not who you want them to be. They are who they are. And so are you. See clearly. Love anyway.